What's up, good people? Thank you for stopping by to visit the channel for these Week 7 projections of some of the notable games that's happening this weekend. If you want to hear a different take of college football from an analytical perspective, if you haven't done so already, please click that subscribe button, click the notification bell, and select all so you don't miss another video. Also, like the video and share the video. It helps the channel grow. And give me your projections of some of the notable games that is happening this weekend. So if you've been around for a minute, these are just projections based on the computer model, not an actual preview, but this is just an advanced stats breakdown. If you wanted to check out some of the previews, I've already previewed 3 of the bigger games this weekend, all ranked versus ranked matchups. So let's get started with Utah and USC. When Utah has the ball, they are one of the more hyper efficient offenses in the country. Not particularly explosive, as you can see how they're 55th in adjusted offense explosiveness. But at the end of the day, when you really see them as a whole, what they do is their ability to be able to control the line of scrimmage and to be able to stay ahead of the chains is really where they're best at. One of the more surprising statistics is the adjusted passing down offense. Cam Rising is just really on it this year, 11th in the country in adjusted passing down offense. And one of the bigger surprises is USC, 87th when you adjust for opponent in rush defense. That is not conducive to play against a team like Utah, who is really efficient, not particularly explosive, 31st in the country in rush offense, and their offensive line is 13th in offensive line yardage, actually. USC is 68th in defensive line yardage, so that really tells me that their defensive line is not really good at controlling the point. If Utah is able to control that line of scrimmage and keep Caleb Williams off the field and also not turn the ball over, which is where USC is really great at this year, this game can get a little interesting for USC, especially if Caleb Williams cannot get into a rhythm. When USC has the ball, they are ranked in the top 10 in 7 out of the 10 categories, which is very good. But the thing what makes this USC offense goes is their ability to control the line of scrimmage. They are number 1 in offensive line yards and number 1 in rush offense. And that's been a staple for any Lincoln Riley coach team on that offensive side. Even when he was in Oklahoma with Baker Mayfield in his first year, they were better running the football and controlling the clock as opposed to them throwing it. Everybody remembers Baker Mayfield chucking it deep, but that offense always started with the ground game. And it's no secret here with SC. When they control the line of scrimmage, they are a problem to deal with, and it opens everything up. But the thing with USC is they're going to go up against a Utah defense that is extremely elite in most of these major categories as well. One of the best teams in the country, 4th in the country in defensive sack rate. USC's pass blocking, not really the best, 56 in offensive sack rate. So they're going to go up against a really stingy Utah pass rush. The thing about Utah is this: they have issues with defensive explosiveness, but when they're on their A game and everybody is in alignment, 5th in defensive success rate. So when they're in alignment, they're tough to move the ball against. But if one person ever breaks contain or misses their assignment, that can lead to big plays. And USC is the type of team that can make you pay for it. So this is going to be a big challenge for the USC offense, but it's an equal challenge as well for the Utah defense. So this side of the ball is going to be really exciting to watch. So at the time of recording, Utah is favored by 3.5 against USC. Should be noted that Utah is playing this game at home, road game for USC. Utah is trying to get back into the swing of things after losing to UCLA, so this is going to be a really good challenge for them. My model actually has Utah favored as well by 3.7 points, so I guess you can kind of round up to that 4 with a 60% win probability. All right, the second game on the schedule, we got Kentucky and Mississippi State. When Kentucky has the ball, Mississippi State's defense has a clear advantage in 8 out of the 10 categories. The only category that Kentucky has an advantage is their offensive explosiveness versus Mississippi State's. If Kentucky can generate those explosive plays, then this can get a little problematic for Mississippi State, a team that is notoriously efficient defense. They're really not really great at everything defensively, but I will say the only thing that they are elite in is their defensive line yards. 18th in the country in that metric. Kentucky on the opposite side, the offensive line has gone down quite a bit from the last few years. 76 in offensive line yards, and then when you look at stuff rate, 92nd in that metric as well. Especially with the running backs of Cavassier Smoke and Chris Rodriguez Jr. That's not really it's not really a good stat to have, especially when you have those two backs if you're not able to kind of push the pile a little bit. So that way they're doing all the work. At the end of the day, they're going to have to get better at that, especially if the main goal is to control the clock. If Will Levis can make some throws to the Kentucky wide receivers, Tavion Robinson, he's been there more consistent out of the running backs that they have. Barrion Brown has tremendous track speed. His catch rate is at 67% though, but he's been targeted 26 times. If he's able to make those catches and get out in space, I don't think there's going to be a guy from Mississippi State, man, that can kind of catch up to him, especially if he's able to get the first few steps, because that kid is electric with the ball in his hands. When I reviewed when Mississippi State had the ball, initially I thought Mississippi State would have a clear advantage, but there's a lot of pushes here than I was expecting to see. Now, Mississippi State, they still have the advantage 3-2 over Kentucky, but the efficiency of both sides, offensive and defensively, it's going to be a battle, I believe, here. And especially when you're talking about the Mike Leach offense, which is really pass, and then run. And as you can see here with Mississippi State 28th in rush offense, 29th in pass offense. They really throw the ball more than they do pass, obviously, but when they do run, they are efficient at it. But Kentucky's defense is, really solid, honestly. 38th in rush defense, 37th in pass defense. They are particularly elite in passing downs. But the issue with Kentucky is that they don't really get to the quarterback as well. So they really trust the secondary to make those plays in the back end. As crazy as it sounds for Mississippi State, you would think that they would be great on passing downs, but they're 52nd in the country in that metric. So they like to stay out ahead of the chains and use that passing game as the extension of their running game. When you look at their standard down offense at 27th, as opposed to Kentucky's standard down defense at 46. So this is going to be a really good test for the Kentucky defense here. But overall, Mississippi State, they do have an advantage here somewhat. So for the computer projection, the current line at the time of recording has Mississippi State favored by 4. However, my model actually has it less than that. Round up basically in favor of Mississippi State by 3 points here. Really 2.9 if we're being technical, but it's giving Mississippi State a 58% win probability over the Wildcats on the road. All right, we're heading to ACC country for the next 2 games here that are on the schedule. We have Florida State and Clemson. Now, this is not a ranked versus ranked matchup, but this is a curious matchup to look at for sure. Especially, this is a single-digit spread, which kind of got my attention. So, Florida State, when they have the ball, they're really going to be adept at generating explosive plays here. This is really going to be where they hang their hat on. 5th in the country in adjusted offensive explosiveness, which is, highly elite, very, very good. And passing offense, 15th in the country as opposed to Clemson's passing defense, which is 43rd. The one thing that I can say for Florida State is if they are attempting to run the football against Clemson, I don't know if they're going to have as much success. Clemson is a top 10 team in rush defense and a top 3 team in defensive stuff rate and 3rd in defensive line yardage. Clemson stops 33% of their opponent's carries at or behind the line of scrimmage. Florida State allows 20.5% of their opponents' carries to be stopped at or behind the line of scrimmage. So the offensive line is not really doing a good job of generating a push up front, but you're going up against a Clemson defensive line that can control the line of scrimmage and can consistently push the pile back. I don't know if they're going to have, Florida State, not really sure if they're going to have as much success being able to run it. So it looks like they're going to be more one-dimensional than anticipated here. when Clemson has the ball, this is an overwhelming advantage that they have against the Florida State defense here. Clemson is one of the more efficient teams in the country, not necessarily elite offensively, but much better than what they were last year. And I feel like I keep saying that every time I preview a Clemson game or just previewing them in general. But I mean, that offense last year was atrocious. But seeing them where they are this year offensively, it is a sight to behold. Not really the elite offensive teams with under Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence, so to speak, but much better, very good nonetheless. Pretty solid. As we can see here, they have a overwhelming advantage against Florida State's defense here. They should be able to, I wouldn't necessarily say have their way against Florida State because it is college football. Anything can happen, especially if you're playing a game on the road. But they should generate some success here against Florida State's defense here. A defense here that the only pushes here that we see here is defensive sack rate. Defensive sack rate and defensive explosiveness on both ends. Clemson not really particularly explosive offensively, but Florida State, when they do allow explosive plays, it is they do allow them at the worst times, so to speak. But in any event, those are the two pushes that they have here: sack rate and defensive explosiveness. But those are the two things that if Florida State can turn the tide, so to speak, this can be one where they can kind of make the Clemson offense be a little disjointed. So the Vegas line in this game, this is where the curiosity comes into play here. I mentioned earlier how this was a single-digit spread. This is how single it is. Clemson is favored by 4.5 against Florida State on the road, which is a very curious line here. My computer model has Clemson favored by less than that. I guess you can kind of round down to 4, so to speak, give or take here. So expected score. It's supposed to be an expected score of 27.6 to 23.3. So it's looking at 4.3, give or take. So interesting Vegas line here, and also the model itself. Very surprising that the model is not hammering Clemson, considering how I'm seeing how Clemson has a clear advantage over Florida State offensively. All right, and the last game that we're talking about is Syracuse and NC State. And yes, this is a ranked versus ranked matchup. What a time to be alive. Man, one of the better stories of the year, other than Kansas making their run so far this year. Syracuse is doing it, and they are doing a really good job. So shout out to Syracuse. Excellent year so far. Season's not over yet, but let's get cracking here. So when they have the ball, there's going to be a pretty big disadvantage against an NC State defense, which is one of the better defenses in the country. Syracuse, their strength is obviously going to be their offensive line and their run blocking. Offensive stuff rate, they're 5th in the country. Very good at that. Also, offensive line yardage, 11th in the country. So very adept in pushing the pile and in controlling the line of scrimmage. Not so good at pass blocking, 97th in offensive sack rate. But if they're able to find holes for the running back to kind of run through, this can be a game where if they can control the line of scrimmage and lean on NC State here, this is where they're going to have some success here offensively. I don't think I've said this ever, but when NC State has the ball, they are going to be challenged by a pretty sound and disruptive Syracuse defense here. Notably in defensive sack rate, Syracuse is one of the top teams in the country in sack rate, 7th in the country in that metric. Defensive line yards, however, one of the worst. It's a weird stat to have, especially if you're on the defensive line here. One of the tops in the country in getting to the quarterback, but not really good at holding the point of attack. 101st in the country in stuff rate, 127th in the country in defensive line yards. So the offensive line for NC State here, if they're able to lean on Syracuse here on the run game, they should be able to wear them down a little bit. But Syracuse is generally good at also not giving up explosive plays, 33rd in the country in defensive explosiveness, and on passing down defense, they're 31st as well. But yeah, that's really crazy to see a team like Syracuse, who's undefeated, to be not particularly disruptive as far as stopping runs out or behind the line of scrimmage to keep the other team off schedule. But for the most part, when they get in passing down scenarios here, when they get to the quarterback, they are extremely disruptive in that metric here. So it's a very, very curious, stat line to see on the Syracuse defense. All right, so the Vegas line has Syracuse favored by 3.5 at the time of recording. The computer model has them favored by 3.7 points here in this game, with a win probability of 60.4. In my opinion, this is going to be one of the more intriguing games of the weekend. I know there's a lot of ranked versus ranked matchups, but this is one that is not talked about as often as the other bigger games, so to speak. So I'm very curious to see how this one shakes out. So with that being said, that's going to be it for the projection show for the computer models and the advanced stats. So if you stayed here this long, thanks for hanging out with me. If you can, please give the video a like and also subscribe to the channel as well if you want to hear a different take of college football from an analytical perspective by looking at the advanced stats and not necessarily the raw stats here, just to give you kind of different take of the game here. So thank you for watching and thank you for visiting the channel, and I will see you on the next video.